Welcome to the College Kickoff from College Guidance Network. I am your host, Brennan Barnard, and we are joined today by a dream team of college admission leaders who I will introduce in just a second. But before we do that, I know that 12th graders are playing the waiting game, and they might be thinking a lot about the free application for federal student aid if you're applying for financial aid. And talking with admission leaders, we just want you to know that you can just trust that colleges are doing their best and following all the latest from the Department of Education and monitoring things, and will update applicants as they know more. So with that, we are going to turn to the 11th graders and those underclass students who are just beginning their college search. And like I said, we have some amazing guests with us tonight. And first is Khala Granville Williamson, who is the Director of Undergraduate Admission and Recruitment for Morgan State University. Welcome, Khala.
Thank you, Brennan. It's proud to be here.
Thanks. And Matt McGann is the Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at Amherst College. Welcome, Matt.
It's great to be here. Hello, everyone.
And finally, Sacha Thieme, who is the Assistant Vice Provost and Executive Director of Admission at Indiana University, Bloomington. Welcome.
Thanks, Brennan. Hello, everyone.
We could spend the whole show just reading your titles. And a fun fact, Khala and Sacha worked together at Indiana University. Am I right?
You are right.
All right. And Matt, I don't know if you've ever been to Indiana. I know you got your master's. You got both your degrees in Massachusetts, MIT and Northeastern, right? And
yeah. So I've been to 49 states, and we can figure out the 50th later on.
Oh,
that's
man.
Cool tease.
That's going to be what keeps people to the end. And we're going to be using the chat box tonight. So go in there now, those of you who are joining us, and please share where you're zooming in from and what grade you're in, whether you're a parent or a student or a counselor. And we'll also be using the Q&A. So our guests are going to be kind enough to just give you the straight talk. So go in there and put all your questions in there. And while you do that, I want to start with just kind of your kind of each of your top tip for students and families entering into this process. And maybe Sacha, we'll start with you. You're the first on my display.
Absolutely. Thank you. So students and families, we are so excited to be in this space with you. And I think the top tip that I would give is students to use this time in your junior year just to really learn as much as you can about yourself. You're going to have so many people asking you questions about what do you want to study and where do you want to go, and that's going to feel really overwhelming. But the more that you can learn about your interests, what makes you tick, the types of things you're looking for, that's going to help you feel more confident in this process. And we'll talk, I'm sure, tonight about how to organize your time, how to be successful this year and prepare yourself and have the confidence. But my first tip is just to learn about you.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Khala next. And I'll just say, I mean, we have folks coming from all over the country, from Illinois and California and North Carolina, Jersey and Massachusetts and everywhere. So it's great to have you all with us. So Khala, your top tip?
My top tip is definitely talking about finances early, especially now with all of the different things happening with financial aid, and just setting realistic expectations about what your family's budget is when it comes to financing post-secondary education. That way you're not putting the cart before the horse and kind of falling in love with the thing that may not necessarily be what you can actually afford. And of course, if you can make it happen, then make it happen. But finances and having that conversation early is definitely very important, and something that we're even having the conversation about in our home.
As are we. I have a senior in high school, so I'm right there with you. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I echo each of those two things. And what I would add is on top of knowing yourself and thinking about finances, don't take the foot off the gas of being the best you that you can be in the classroom and beyond. So keep getting good grades. This is the most important time for your learning and your success in the classroom. And don't stop doing those things that make you a whole person outside the classroom. and all of those relationships that give you the energy and support to go on. So keep at it while you're doing all of this college process.
Thanks. And I'm going to stick with you because you're still unmuted. And, the title of this is What Colleges Are Looking For. So what are colleges looking for? There's a broad question, but what are the kind of current expectations that colleges have for applicants?
Yeah, I know that a lot of attention gets paid to recommendation letters and essays and writing the perfect essay. But actually, the thing that is at the core of the college application is your academic success. That college is a time to continue growing academically and beyond. And the core of the admission process and the core of our institutions is about education, and that begins in the classroom. So we're going to hope that this year, and as you come from your junior year into your senior year, you're going to keep taking those classes that'll challenge you and prepare you for college, and that you'll keep having great academic success in those classes.
Great, thanks. And we're going to dig into that a little more later. But there's a question, Sacha, that came in here, and that's, is there a rubric you follow for evaluating applicants, and where can we find it?
That's not an uncommon question, for sure. And in most cases, for some institutions, it can be pretty clear cut. But for other institutions where there are more applications than what we have spaces for, there isn't a specific rubric that is used. And I love what's already been shared about monitoring and managing your academics in a way that you can be confident in that process. And we can tell if a student really hasn't done the research to know that your programs align with what is being offered, or the curriculum that you've taken doesn't match what is required by our faculty. So those are little ways that you can be most competitive. But other things that we're looking for throughout the entire application is just a body of evidence that you are academically ready to be successful in the environment that we're providing, and that there is some either alignment with some of the things that you've done that match experiences we can offer, or maybe you're doing something new that would contribute to our community here in a new way. So it's a pretty broad set of criteria that's really centered around the student as a whole.
Thanks. And right, every school is going to have a different rubric, right? They're going to have different expectations and different desires for what they look for in an applicant. I mean, like the University of California system has their 13 factors they're looking at in applicants, and other schools have very specific guidelines outlined on their website, and some are a little less clear, right? I mean, some are just asking you to challenge yourself academically and like you said, Matt, be the best of who you are. Kayla, there's a question that came in, and this is one you've heard before, probably many times, but what is better, an A in a regular class or a B in an advanced or AP class? And the easy answer to that is an A in the AP class, right?
Of course. But, also, it's really about, did you try your best? And if you can say that successfully and defend that in all of the things that you're doing, because again, it's a holistic way that we're looking through your academic career, as Sacha said. So while you may have a B in a course that was a little bit more rigorous, you're still balancing that out with A's in other spaces that may potentially even spark more joy for you, hence why you excelled in some of those classes. So at the end of the day, if you're really doing your best and trying and exploring, and those things, as Sacha said, are aligning with your potential interests when you get to the college level, and you're able to defend that I took these classes because they interested me, I tried my best, I'm here and I feel prepared to be in this particular learning environment, then let that be the story. Just because students have all A's doesn't necessarily mean that they're college ready, because college readiness is more than just what you're saying in the transcript and in the essay and all these different things. It's about maturity.
And that leads right into this next question, the maturity piece, because, and Matt, maybe I'll turn to you with this one. It's from a junior who says, I'm a junior with all A's who did poorly freshman and sophomore years. Are my grades from those years going to pull me down in the long run? And so it kind of speaks to that maturity question of a student who has grown, and how's that looked at?
Yeah, colleges generally will look at grades throughout your high school years, but we know that the more recent your work is, the more predictive it is of how you'll be able to succeed on our campuses. So certainly your junior year grades in many ways are more predictive, are of more value at many places than those earlier on. That's longer ago and perhaps less representative of the student you are today. That also continues on into your senior year. I know that for some students there can be a thought of letting up a little bit, taking a little bit less rigorous classes senior year, maybe not having to do as well because you've got these 3 years before you. But to really maximize your chances, not only in admission, but maybe more importantly, to succeed once you get to college, taking on those challenging courses now and continuing to get the best grades you can will set you up well for admission success and college success.
Well said. And I mean, I think to our writer who wrote in the question, it's going to depend on which school, right? Because some schools that are super selective are going to, if they're looking at students who did really well all 4 years, and they're looking at a student who's only had 1 year of really high quality work, that could affect things. And so just as they go into their search, they need to be realistic about what they're looking for. Sacha, there's another question. How would you rank the various extracurricular activities in terms of adding value to a student's profile, in terms of job, internship, pre-collegiate summer program, volunteering, academic exploration at a community college, that kind of thing?
Well, I think most of us who have spent our career reviewing applications would say that it is about quality, not quantity. So really thinking, when I mentioned get to know yourself, one way to do that is through exploring activities. And so it's not to say that you have to have just a few activities that you do all 4 years, because part of that exploration is trying new things. There isn't necessarily a ranking for which activities are the best, but we do look for students who have a well-rounded approach. So it could be a job. I worked multiple jobs throughout high school because I had a goal in mind. It could be leadership activities. It could be certainly service. We're looking for students who are going to engage and contribute to our communities when you get here, because it's a space you're going to live. And then also, one thing that did happen during the pandemic, when traditional activities were not available, we saw these incredible ways that students were getting engaged in new and creative ways. And we thought that was great too. There are actually online international language communities or online service communities. So it doesn't have to be this cookie cutter set of experiences that you have, but they should resonate with what you are interested in. And we'll be able to tell pretty quickly if you've got a list you've assembled because you thought it needed to look good on an application versus if you have a list assembled because it really resonates with who you are.
That's really important. And I mean, I think there's this sometimes going into the college admission experience, folks think there's kind of a checklist of things they need to do. Like, okay, I need to volunteer. I need to do a summer program. I need to do this. And it's really not that that kind of stagnant, right? And I think one of the big things right now is kind of out there in the culture is this idea of doing research and paying to do summer research. And maybe Matt, can you talk about how admissions offices look at that? I mean, there's a bunch of companies and things like that will match you with a mentor and from a distinguished college to do research. And do you see right through that, or is that valued? Or, I mean, thoughts on that?
So yeah, I mean, I would offer caution and ask for folks to be savvy consumers about when you're shelling out large amounts of dollars, especially if why your intended purpose is to look good to folks like us on this screen. My hope is that you're going to do your best to follow your interests and not necessarily to find the ways to do it that cost the most. We talked earlier about having those important financial conversations coming into the college process, but really those that are the right financial fit and the right fit with your goals and your values. So there are ways, if you're really excited about science and the science research kinds of opportunities, before jumping to pay thousands of dollars, I would look at those opportunities around you. I would look to the closest colleges and universities to you, and perhaps start talking with professors there and see if they'd be willing to take on local high school students more locally. And there are other ways of being involved with that too that we can talk about. But I think I offer caution, and think about what you're really trying to gain from these experiences in terms of skills and learning, rather than just impressing us on the screen.
Thanks. And just to build on that, there's a Jenna asks, is the National Student Leadership Council, NSLC, a good research program? And again, it's one of those, it is a pay to do research, right? I mean, I think it speaks to what you just said, right? I mean, it might be a good program, but you have to look at the value and be a good consumer.
I think you're right on with that. Yeah.
Kayla, there's a question here about a school that doesn't give grades, but has narratives on it for a transcript, and there's the mastery transcript. And I actually work for a school that is mastery learning, and so we don't have grades. How will that affect admission decisions?
That's where the role of an admissions counselor truly comes in, to really learn their schools, to understand the curriculum in that school, to have relationships with those school counselors and college counseling offices, so that they can really understand, okay, these are non-alphanumeric grades, but when a student has achieved this particular mastery, this is what that means in this particular context, because school A is not the same as school B at any level. And so that gets at the heart of why we do what we do in terms of holistic admission, because we're getting to know that school, getting to know that student in the context of that school, so that we can adequately make an understanding and a decision about, is that student truly prepared to be in the academic learning environment that we are a part of and hoping to recruit them into.
Thanks. And I'll stick with you for a second, because it kind of speaks to that context piece. There's a question here about how admission offices might look at post-AP level classes taken through the student's high school versus taking a similar class through a local college. Kind of the idea of taking dual enrollment or taking a class at a college versus something offered at a high school, and how that looks in terms of the context.
I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't say it looks well, because it expresses what your true passions are, and where you're finding that joy in the academic space, where you're willing to give of your time and your energy. And so when I've ever seen students that, they took that AP history class and then they just started to take psychology and government, and even going into additional social sciences at a dual enrollment type of space, that told me that student really found joy and is sparked by engaging in these types of social sciences. And also it tells a little bit about what that student is going to be thinking through and possibly getting involved in once they come to my particular campus. And so I love to see that. It's a great way to also talk about engagement. So even going into those extracurricular activities, that's an additional way to also show the quality of the opportunities that you're willing to participate in, that sometimes are not being a part of the club or being the secretary of something else.
Right. Thank you. Sacha, there's a question here. How do you weigh good grades with very average ACT tests or ACT scores? My daughter does not do well on timed tests, has some learning differences. So how do you look at kind of the balance between the grades and the tests?
Well, I mentioned the body of evidence before. So certainly with the wave of test optional admissions that was even more formally discovered during the pandemic, A lot of that research centers on the predictive value of those individual components. So while most of the research would say that combined, they can show predictive value, for some students, not every piece of evidence is as reflective of their abilities. So in the spaces where a school allows you to determine if your test score is reflective of your achievement, then you can decide whether or not to have that considered. And I would say that a school that is committed to that path is very sincere in making that offer. We believe Indiana University is one of them. We were test optional before the pandemic, and so we did years of research to feel confident that we can effectively evaluate a student's readiness for our academic environment with or without a test score. And so many of our students still submit it, and it's a great predictor because we see the alignment with their academic performance in the classroom. And then for other students, there's difference, and that is natural. We also have students for whom the test is the highest performer in their portfolio compared to what they've done in the classroom. That could be a different kind of learner. So it's really a part of that search process, I think, for a student to feel confident that they're applying to a space that will allow them that choice if it's right for them.
That's helpful. Thanks. Matt, there's a question here about application essays, the personal statement, and how students should start to think about their topic. How important is the essay overall in the application? Maybe you could just touch on some of those pieces.
Yeah, happy to talk about the essay. And I think people focus a lot on the essay in the admission process, in part because a lot of the rest of the application, by the time you're applying, is already set. You can't go back and change your grades, your courses, the activities that you've been involved with, but there is this big blank text box into which you can put whatever 650 words you like. I think you should think about the questions and sincerely try to approach the questions as they're presented. Which seems obvious, but sometimes students maybe try to outthink the questions a little bit. So I'd start with reading the questions for both the personal essays and for those schools that have their own questions or supplemental questions. Another way I like to talk to students about thinking about their essay is it should be personal and it should be about you, and really in some ways only you. If your essay was dropped in the halls of your school and your best friend picked it up and it didn't have your name on it, I hope that they would read that essay and say, I know exactly who wrote this, rather than picking up an essay that feels like it could be anyone or someone pretending to be someone else. I hope that who you are and those things that are important to you and how you'll be as a member of our campus community will in some way come through in how you talk about yourself in the essay.
Thanks. It's definitely and kind of in the not that you rank different criteria, but how important is the essay compared to other parts of the application?
Yeah, we've talked a bit here we just talked about tests, and we've talked earlier about grades and curriculum, and those academic things are that's the foundation of all of this. But we don't admit numbers. We don't admit walking test scores and GPAs. Really, our campuses are hoping to build educational communities. And we know that community is more than just how well you'll do in class. We want to know about how you're going to be as a roommate in the residence halls, how you'll be as someone to eat dinner with in the dining hall, how you'll be a part of our clubs and other kinds of things that are happening here, because the learning that happens on a college campus goes beyond the classroom. And as we try to build these communities, those kinds of intangible qualities, non-cognitive qualities that can come through in an essay, a letter of recommendation, or other parts of the application can absolutely have an important impact on your application.
Thanks. Yeah, who you are matters, not just what you do, right?
Absolutely.
Khala, there's a question here, and it kind of comes back to that idea of context. And the question is, colleges say they look at applicants in the context of their high school, but even within the same high school, students have different family and health circumstances. How do colleges account for that, or do they?
They do. And I think that's exactly what my colleague is referring to is, telling your story when you're trying to craft that essay or provide any other parts of the application that provide that contextual environment for which you have found yourself in academically, socially, politically, just all the intersections of who you are. So to that question, again, if, as my colleague said, if you drop that essay in the middle of nowhere, is that truly going to be reflective of your situation, or is that something that can be reflective of 100 other people's situations? So I always, the essay is, admittedly, it was one of the last things that I read when I would look at applications in that way, just because I wanted to get to like the foundation piece. And then that allowed for me to be, oh, okay, this is how the foundation piece and their story kind of come together. Or this is what I'm seeing in the transcript. And now it makes sense why what I saw doesn't necessarily align, and that this student is showing other strengths in non-cognitive spaces that I find really, really interesting. And then when I compare that with the extracurricular activities, and maybe I met that student on the road, all of it really kind of gives me a well-rounded, holistic picture of that student's aptitudes to succeed. So again, be yourself. Your grades are your grades. You have an opportunity to share as much or as little as you want in those personal statements, in those essays. Use the relationships with your high school or your college counselor. And, those letters of recommendation allow for the other people in your life who are supporting you through this process to also talk about who you are, what your character is, what your core values are, because all of that information is just further going to tell the complete story of what you have to offer to the university, and certainly how the university can support your dreams.
Thanks. And Marianne writes in just the suggestion that students and families take a look at their high school profile, the profile that the school puts together to kind of give colleges the context for their high school to understand what's offered there. And it might be a helpful thing for students and families to review from their high school, so they see kind of what that context is being put out there. And then also there are places on the Common App, for example, where you can report family responsibilities and things like that in the activity section. And so taking advantage of those places to really highlight what your personal context is, and using the other information section on the application, right, to share any, maybe if there's a health circumstance that has affected your high school experience, then it might be worth putting that in there. So that, and that does matter to colleges, I think, is what you're saying. So that's really helpful. There is a question here. Well, so do any of your colleges consider demonstrated interest in the application? No. Okay. So the question is, how do colleges measure demonstrated interest? And do they track email interactions? And what else? So the reality is there are some colleges that track demonstrated interest, and demonstrated interest is just ways that an applicant might interact with the college. And some schools, not the three that we have here tonight, but some schools will, in their software, their systems, will track how much a student has had contact with them at a high school visit, or if a campus visit, the student visits the campus, or an email. And then they use that to kind of gauge what the level of engagement a student has with the college. And so those are good questions to ask when you go on a college campus, if they track demonstrated interest, just so you know, and schools should be honest with you about that, like our guests have been tonight. And but I would say beyond that, and sorry to kind of get up on my soapbox here, but beyond the demonstrated interest, you as an applicant and you as a college researcher, students should kind of engage with a college in meaningful ways so you can understand that college, right? Not because you're trying to kind of get inside their heads or prove yourself, but to really know if it's a good fit. And along those lines, Sacha, maybe you could just talk about, there's a question that I think came in during the registration about how do you get a vibe? How do you get the vibe for a campus? How do you get a sense for a campus?
I appreciate that. And when we, just to kind of back to the interest piece, it doesn't mean that when I think of interest, it's not you demonstrating it to, gain in our process. It's really you figuring out if you're interested by engaging with the community in all kinds of different ways. We love to hear that students are super excited about what they've learned about Indiana. But how we encourage them to get that information is visit if you can. But the beautiful thing out of the horrible situation was now that many of us are still offering non-in-person visit opportunities. So you can, as a student, you could sign up for a student panel, or you can get engaged in another visit experience online and start to learn about that space. But I would also sign up for mailing lists. We'll send you information about things happening on our campuses. You can certainly visit the website and see images of students in action. We use all kinds of social media where we are often showing photos and images and videos of our students engaged in being a student. And so you can start to get that vibe of if you could see yourself in those spaces. I think the ultimate way to really get the best experience is when you can visit in person. And in those opportunities, we certainly want students to take advantage of the formal programs, but I always tell a student, go sit in the union, watch students go by, go eat in one of the dining halls, and just get a feel, hear the conversations that are happening. And could you be in that kind of conversation? This is your world and your community, your city, your space for 4 years, more or less. So you want to make sure that it is a good vibe and it's a good fit.
Great points. And also pick up the student newspaper, or go online and find the student newspaper and see what kind of things are happening on campus, but also kind of hot button issues on campus and what students are talking about and concerned about. Those are good ways. And going on, like you said, going on and seeing what's on the website, but also going on kind of social media websites for specific clubs that maybe aren't college sponsored, but are, the Instagram page for the rugby club or whatever it is that might give you a kind of a better sense for what's offered there and kind of the vibe on campus. So there's a question here, Matt. I'm a junior at the moment and I've never truly delved into school clubs. Is it too late for me to start my club journey?
It's never too late. And we hope actually that when you come to our campuses that you'll find even additional new things that you've never been a part of. I know that you've been doing things with your time. They may not just have been with clubs. And don't forget that when you're filling out the activity section of an application, including the Common App, that it's not only asking about clubs, that all of those other things that are important to you that you spend time on, whether it's a job or spending time with your family, whatever those things that you do, those also matter to us. How you spend your time, and time is your most precious resource. That tells us a lot about your values. So if there are clubs at your school or beyond your school that seem exciting to you, that could help develop your interests, and the opportunity cost of the other kinds of things that you'd give up to spend time doing that, if that trade-off seems to make sense to you, if making that time investment makes sense, get involved. Yeah, it's not about how long you've been a part of something, but it's really about the impact that you can make. And you can make an impact right now.
Thanks. And also, I think colleges want to hear about how students spent their time in high school, right?
Yeah.
Right. Out of besides just kind of clubs, there's lots of ways students might be engaged. And there's actually a question here. Again, it comes back to kind of the research piece. And Kayla, maybe I'll turn to you. As a parent, I've encouraged my 3 teens to develop homegrown projects. And again, this is not a club or a formal activity, but the parent has said kind of no pay to play. Think for yourself, what does your community need? What are you passionate about? Pursue it. And then they say, am I steering them wrong, or should I be supplementing this with more formal camps and research opportunities?
No, I that's a great question, because that was one of the things that I would have said during that particular section. There's all types of ways to engage in research. I think about when I was a Girl Scout, and I was participating in these science opportunities. I'd go to my camp during the summer, or maybe just right there in my troop meeting. Those are research. Boy Scouts, 4-H Club. I did a whole leaf collection project, driving around with my mom, collecting all these leaves and researching and creating this scrapbook. It won a state award. Those are research opportunities that are completely free and that also engaged with our community organizations. I think sometimes we forget that you can be a part of these community-based organizations, and they have research opportunities, and most of them are free. You just got to show up on that weeknight or that weekend and be there to participate and engage with the other students or the faculty or whoever is there. There's so many pre-college programs that are out there. You can do them online, you can do them in your community. And all of those are ways that, again, it's really showing that interest that you have, and putting your best foot forward.
Thanks. So Sacha, there's a question that came in about kind of the evolving the application increase and how we're seeing huge increases in apps and people applying to school. Can you talk about how you tackle evaluating a large list of applicants?
Absolutely. And can I just validate that, Mom, further to say that just to ask, what does your community need? If we all ask that question for our entire lives, what would this world look like? And we are certainly looking for students who have been self-driven to answer that question. So I just thought that was fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we've got some chickens and we've got some eggs. We've got the situation with, we know that because students are trying to have a broad list of schools they're considering, and then maybe they want to add some schools that their friends start talking about, that they are applying to more schools, and that is increasing applications at some universities. First, I would remind that there are thousands of universities in this country who are so eager for you to join their communities. So make sure that you aren't maybe just thinking about a small set of schools that are going to get the most applications. It's going to make that process harder. But for those of us that receive, tens of thousands of applications, it's what we've talked about tonight. As we look through those, we're looking at a complete body of evidence. We're certainly looking at students' readiness to be successful in the academic environment that we have. And you can learn a little bit about that academic environment by going to the websites, looking at averages, looking at the experiences that are available. You can start to get a sense if you are in line with that experience. We're also, though, looking, like we said, for activities that match what we have. We certainly expect students to know if we offer the major that they are seeking. And I say that kind of in jest, but we often have, we do have students who apply for majors we don't have. So those are types of things that we would be looking for, small and large. And then in those essays, we really are looking for that connection. How does all the information that you've provided throughout this application come together? So I give an example. I had a student who all of the activities were in one direction. And then I saw a major that appeared to be completely disconnected. But the student in that essay pulled it all together so beautifully that I thought, oh my gosh, that's even more creative or more insightful than if it had all been the same theme throughout. So we do look at all those spaces that we've talked about tonight, and together that determines if we think that's going to be a good fit. That being said, because schools are receiving tens of thousands of applications, if it is determined that your offer is not one of immediate acceptance, that should not make you feel badly about the experiences that you have gained. Mm-hmm. That is one decision from one institution. And again, there are so many where you're going to be wildly successful. So we really want students to hold on to the positivity and the confidence of everything they've put forth and everything they've learned, because everything they learned is going to make their experience more powerful wherever they end up going.
It's a great point. It's not a referendum on their experiences or their humanity,
Right.
which sometimes it does feel like that. And I mean, just on a tactical basis, I mean, a lot of schools that are getting increased applications are hiring outside readers that they train and seasonally to read applications. And so there are some of these ways that schools are doing that. Are any of your offices using artificial intelligence in the admission process? There's a question here about that, and maybe does anyone feel like they can address that?
Well, I will say, I mean, oh, Matt, go ahead. Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, certainly, like every place in every industry, I mean, we're looking for any opportunity to create a more efficient process, mostly in support of the student. So if we are receiving more applications, can we use technology to help us look at, the transcripts, not review the application? I have not heard of any institution that is looking for a non-human approach to do this evaluation that we've described. But there are processing components that could be augmented by the use of technology. And if we can turn around a decision faster for a student or get them better information more quickly and more clearly and more transparently, then I think we're going to explore any research that's going to help us serve students better.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, can it call the application for certain information you're looking for anyway and make that simpler? Matt, did you have something to add, or does that pretty much capture it?
Mostly captures it. I mean, you've heard tonight from, the director, from the associate vice provost, from the dean, stories about us, about specific students we remember reading their essay, reading about their stories. Like, this is clearly a process that the admission officers put a lot of care into your applications, into the ways that we think about you and how you relate to our school's mission and values. And at this point, the AI is not replacing that. This is still a very human process. There's a human on the other end of this. And, in a lot of ways, we're in this because we can't wait to meet you and hope to welcome you to our college communities. Thanks.
And because you're unmuted again, I will, I'll stay with you because it's, there's a question here kind of back to the essay thing. And the student says, my counselor said I should not write about my epilepsy on my application since colleges might not want that kind of liability on campus. How do I share my story then if I have to think about it being held against me?
Yeah, I would hope that folks wouldn't hold that against you. First of all, it's not legal. We begin with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is something that we take very seriously. And to discriminate against students is not something that we're going to do in any kind of way counter to the law or counter to our values. All of our colleges represented here have offices that are devoted to supporting students, whatever their needs may be. And if this is an important part of who you are and how you'll be a member of our community, and this is what you want to talk about, I think a well-handled essay on that can really help the colleges to get to know you, and some of the ways that you have navigated life and how you'd be a member of our communities. So I do think that counselors want the best for you. And beyond the don't write about it, I think you can work with those trusted adults in your life and mentors to help you craft these parts of your application to put your best foot forward. But we're not going to discriminate based on these kinds of things.
Thanks. Kayla, there's a question here. Can you speak to a transfer student? What if a child made the wrong decision, recognizes it, and wants to apply elsewhere? How can you do this in a positive light? And I don't know, maybe so you work at a historically Black college and university. And I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that and how some students might transfer in because they realize maybe that they want to be in that space, or how that might influence things.
Absolutely. We have a lot of students who transfer in from other HBCUs and also from other predominantly white institutions as well, or especially community colleges here in the Maryland area. We have a lot of them here. But when students don't feel that the place that they are is really where they're thriving the most, then absolutely it's time to kind of explore their options. And essentially, you're kind of going through the college process all over again. You're going to explore all the campuses. With transfer students, you're going to see, are the evaluations and your credits going to be accepted for what you have. And I think when you have that student who, didn't feel like that particular institution that they started with was the right fit, I think as a parent, it's, circling, and coming to say, well, what is the right fit for you? Where do you want to go? How can I support you in that journey? And even attending some of those additional college visits with them so that your student doesn't feel like that experience was a failed attempt, that really was just a launch pad for additional success. And I did want to circle a little bit back on the AI question.
Yeah.
We don't use AI in our process either, but one of the things we also get a lot of questions are about how students are using AI in their essays. And we can absolutely tell when you have done that. It definitely comes off very chatbot and all the things. So, don't do that. Be honest, be authentic. We want to get to learn who you are.
Yeah. Thank you. And also, I think the same goes for getting outside help with your essay, right? Whether it's human or artificial, having read many college essays as an admission officer myself, and as you all know, you can tell when it's not written by a student, especially when you're reading the rest of the application and it just doesn't triangulate. So do your own work and trust in yourself and what you put forward. Sacha, can you talk a little bit about early applications? There's a question here about kind of how early action and early decision and how that influences the admission process.
Absolutely. So this is where all of that research that if for our juniors that are out there, that this can really be helpful. You don't have to have all the answers right now, but really not avoiding the process, I think is really important, because for many institutions, we do have an early action or an early decision process. So these are different. Early decision is a commitment that you are establishing at the point of application that if you are accepted by that institution, you are committing to attend. Early action is different in that you're expressing early interest, and then usually the institution will have a notification window that will be earlier than for later applicants. So they're showing early interest in you. It's important to, one, understand which process a school is using, because you are, again, making that commitment. And then this is also where that research is really helpful, to work with the representative. Khala referenced admissions counselors. Work with your admissions representative for your school, your state, or your community to help to really understand what is the best application program for you. There are then institutions that also have later application windows. Often that's called regular decision or late admission. So that could be an option if you discover a school later in the process, then that could be an option for you. But you really want to know what your opportunities will look like at the school that you're interested. The other reason I think some students might use a later application program is I think we talked about this earlier, that junior year or their earlier grades might have been not what they felt was reflective of their readiness. And so they might want to wait to apply. In that case, I come back to the advisement that please speak with the admissions representative for that institution that you're thinking of, because they may tell you, you know what, let us determine that. Go ahead and apply. We'll evaluate you and we'll let you know if we need more grades. But that's going to look different for every school. So it's really that early research that you can do can help you determine which program is appropriate for you.
Thanks. Matt, anything to add in terms of early decision and how that plays out in your process?
Yeah, so I work at an early decision school. Earlier in my career, I worked at an early action school. I think a big part of this is just coming back to the first thing that Sacha talked about on this application, on this session tonight, is knowing yourself before you come into knowing your colleges. And look at this, you're here on a Thursday night, CGN Live, you're getting an early start on this. And if you can come to a point where you know yourself and can come to understand the schools that best fit that version of yourself and your goals and your aspirations, and you've done that well in advance, as clearly you're getting an early start on this, so that's great. I commend you. If that school that rises to the top of your list is a place that has an early program, you may want to think about it. And if that place is a place with one of these binding early decision programs, ask yourself the question, is this a place that I would certainly attend? Have I identified this as the number one place? And if that's the case, you may wish to file an binding early decision application. But if those conditions aren't met, most students that are admitted during regular decision, but there can be advantages to applying early, whether that's early action, getting an earlier decision, or an early decision process where you may get additional consideration in the process.
Great, thanks. And I'm gonna answer a couple questions just myself here in the chat. And while I do that, or in the Q&A, while I do that, I want you all to be thinking about this question that came in. I really like. Can you share one cool thing about your institution that we might not find on your website? And how somebody might find that. I think it's an interesting question, because as people start to research colleges, how do you identify some of those things? So while you're thinking about that, there's a question here about some high schools students take 8 or 9 classes a semester, and other kids are only allowed to take 5 or 6 each semester. How do you take this all into account? This is all taken into account via the not only the counselor letter of recommendation, but also the school profile, and that's how they get to know schools really well and read within the context of that school. Then there is another question about early decision, and can I do multiple early decision applications? And the answer is, for early decision, that's no. It's because it's a binding decision, and you can only apply to one, but you can apply to multiple schools early action. Mostly, there are a couple of schools you can only apply. It's called restrictive early action, so it gets a little nuanced, but in general, that's true. So that talks to that a bit. And then there's a question: our school counselor told us to apply EA or ED regardless of the strength of 11th grade transcript. Her strategy is for us to just get deferred if we don't get admitted in EA. Is that smart or dangerous? And I would, and our guests could disagree with me if you'd like, but I would lean on that is dangerous, because you might not get deferred, you might get denied, right? And so I would, if your transcript is not as strong as you'd like, I would wait. And please, anybody raise your hand if you disagree with me. And
I would just say, go back to, it can be institution specific, because sometimes I don't say demonstrated interest, but right, by applying earlier, you might be in the pool, that early consideration. So I think it's institution specific, but I think for many institutions, your advice is spot on.
Right. Thank you. All right. Kayla, do you want to start with your one cool thing?
So Morgan State has the only earthquake simulator on the entire East Coast.
Wow. And how might they find that? I mean, how would they find that random? Does that share it on the tour, or would they have to be interested in a certain major to learn that?
I was talking with a faculty member, and they're in our School of Engineering. And so they were just talking about some of the cool things happening in their area. And they're like, yeah, we have an earthquake simulator. We're the only one on the East Coast that does. And I was like, why is this not in our promotional material? Like, these are things I should be able to tell students. So it was really cool to learn. I haven't been in it yet, but it definitely is one thing that is a hidden gem on our campus.
That's cool. And could explain the shaking of the building from time to time. Matt, what's one cool thing at Amherst?
Yeah, I'm excited because in a couple weeks we have our annual literary festival, which we do in conjunction with the National Book Award Foundation. So National Book Award winners and finalists, and this year a Pulitzer Prize winner and a poet laureate is coming to campus to give some talks. But also they come and sit in on classes, and they're guests in our small classes. Amherst is a pretty small place for small classes. So students are getting feedback from these really accomplished writers, and also spending some time across the street at the Emily Dickinson Museum, which we run at the house where she grew up and wrote most of her poetry. So it's a fabulous thing. I've always loved to read, and to get to be in the presence of current luminaries and, and famous a luminary of yore is a wonderful thing. And I always look forward to it each year.
Nice. How about at Indiana University?
So because we are in Indiana and people think that it's, just the middle of nowhere, it's not. But I always love to share that we teach more foreign languages at Indiana University than any university in the country. So students can choose up to 70 to 80 different languages in a semester. And because those lesser studied languages are tracked, we know that all 4 individuals formally studying Estonian in the country are IU. So
wow.
if you want a less studied language, come to Indiana.
Or maybe all 70 of them. Take a class.
Right.
That's great. So we are kind of nearing the end of our hour here. And so I want to go one last question as we close things out. And that is, as you each kind of reflect, knowing what you know, you've all had many years in mission, and you have read many applications. If you were to go back and tell the younger you, the 11th grade you, what they should do differently in your search, how would you advise yourself differently? What would you, with kind of years of experience, what would you tell yourself differently? And Kayla, maybe we'll start with you, because Matt looks like he's pondering.
I was like, I don't know. I have to think about my that time. Honestly, I don't know if I would have done anything differently. And I say that because I grew up in a small town outside of Lexington, Kentucky, and universities didn't come to my high school because there was an automatic assumption that there weren't going to be smart and brilliant kids coming from there. Or if there were, they were just going to go to the state colleges, and that was it. So I was fortunate that I had a parent who was willing to go with me and explore. And this is back in the day when you had the college books, and I would spend nights going through all the pages trying to find colleges that had majors that I was interested in. And I would circle them and tell my mom, can we go here? And, she would put together a whole little college tour for me during breaks and whatnot. And it was just a fun opportunity to learn about these institutions, to talk with faculty and staff, but also to talk with my mom about, the realistic expectations of, what my college experience really could be like. It brought us closer. It made my time, once I did commit to an institution, much more successful. And I'm really grateful for having had a parent who invested in me that way. And I think for other students, when you have that type of investment, whether it's a parent or a counselor or someone who's just a supportive adult, don't take that for granted.
I love that. Some of my fondest memories with my parents are from my college visits. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I came in to the college process probably like many students with a lot of anxiety. As a first-generation college student, I didn't necessarily know what to expect from the process. I don't think I trusted myself in the process, and I don't know that I gave enough care to the trusted adults and mentors around me in that process. If I could go back, I would thank those teachers and counselors around me who made it possible for me to achieve a college education, get a bachelor's degree for the first time in my family, and to really show my appreciation for all of the support that allowed me to get to where I was able to be. So thank your family and your teachers and your counselors. Don't take that for granted, because they care for you and they want what's best for you.
That's great advice, really, to ground this whole experience in gratitude. All right, Sacha, bring us home.
Well, I think you can see why so many of us believe so strongly in this educational journey and this opportunity. So I'm also first generation, and didn't have anybody to pave a way or even know what the path looked like, but a lot of support and a lot of encouragement to take a different approach. I think one of the other reasons why I'm so passionate about this idea of knowing truly as much as you can know who you are. And a lot of that comes much later in life. But if I had felt confident to what was just shared, if I had a confidence in myself to step off the path that I was on, because it took me 2 years into my undergraduate to know that I didn't have to major in what I thought I was majoring in. And I was majoring in it because it led immediately to a job. And that was the focus. Now we call that the pragmatist. But at the time, I thought that is exactly and only why I was going to embark on this college experience. And once I stepped off that path, the next 2 years were wildly different. To now, when I see a student like me, when they are lit up by the learning that happens when you have matched with a program that speaks to you in a different way, good things will happen. I still found a job. I still had a great career. It just looked very different than the beginning. And if I had just been able to be true to myself and have that confidence to step off that path earlier, I think it would have been even more time to do that.
All great advice. And I'm going to return to that piece of gratitude, because I'm so grateful for you all just spending this time with us tonight and sharing your wisdom with everyone. And thank you for everyone who attended. This Sunday, we're going to have another college planning seminar, a half an hour on what you should look for in colleges, right? So we are talking tonight about what colleges are looking for from you. And now we're going to flip the script, and that's at 7 p.m. Eastern. There's details in the chat. We'd also love your feedback on today's episode. And like it said earlier, you'll have the chance to win a $50 gift card. So again, thank you all, and have a great night.